Hi guys. Today we are going to find out, what if the steam engine had never been created? You are not standing on the shoulders of an industrial giant. You are standing on a quiet, grassy knoll. The air you breathe is noticeably cleaner, absent the sooty tang of coal smoke that defined centuries in our timeline. Instead of the distant hum of a power grid, your ears tune to the rhythmic crunch of gravel under cartwheels and the clop of horse hooves. This is a world where Thomas Newcomen's iron pump remained a curious footnote, and James Watt never doodled his separate condenser. The great liberating and terrifying power of pressurized steam simply never enters humanity's toolkit. You quickly realize the scale of everything is smaller, more intimate, and far, far slower. A journey of 50 miles is a major expedition, not a casual day trip, and news travels only as fast as a horse can gallop. Your survival would depend less on digital savvy and more on practical, physical skills known to your great-grandparents. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know where you're watching from and what the local time is. It feels fitting for this slower world. Now, sit back and let's dive into today's alternate journey together. Imagine you are a merchant in a bustling European port city, let's say Bristol, around the year 1830. Your wealth is tied not to factories, but to the tall ships bobbing in the harbor, their sails furled, waiting for the wind. The most powerful machine you've ever seen is a large water wheel, driving hammers in a metalworks, its power limited by the river's flow. The concept of a horsepower is not a quaint metric. It is the literal, biological limit of your economy. Progress is measured in generations, not in quarterly earnings reports, and your life is shaped by the rhythms of nature, not the factory whistle. You gaze across the Atlantic, a vast and terrifyingly efficient barrier that dictates the rhythm of your business. Your ships are beautiful, complex wooden organisms, but they are slaves to the weather and currents. A voyage to the Americas is a multi-month gamble, not a scheduled crossing. You invest in a shipment of Virginia tobacco, knowing it will be half a year before you see any return, if the ship returns at all. There are no steam tugs to guide your vessels into harbor. They enter and leave only when the tide and wind permit. The global map is a patchwork of isolated coastal enclaves, with vast, unconquerable interiors on every continent. The idea of a weekly transatlantic passenger service is the stuff of pure fantasy, a Jules Verne novel without the Nautilus. Empires are maritime networks, thin threads of control stretched over oceanic distances. They cannot project power inland in any sustained way. Geography remains the supreme military strategist. The world feels larger, more mysterious, and far more dangerous for those who traverse it. Your understanding of abroad is not of other nations, but of other port cities that you hope your ships can reach. The deep ocean is a realm of monsters and mysteries, not a highway for iron leviathans. This age of sail is not a romantic era, but a period of profound and enforced patience. Your life is a lesson in managing delays, accepting uncertainty, and respecting the immense power of nature. You leave the port and travel inland, the world shrinking from the global to the deeply local with every mile. The roads are dirt tracks, churned to mud in the rain and dust in the sun, dictated by ancient Roman paths. Your carriage, a bone-rattling wooden contraption, is pulled by a team of horses that require constant rest and replacement. The journey to a city just 100 miles away takes 3 days, a costly expedition of inns, tolls, and fodder. You pass villages that are self-contained universes, their horizons limited to a day's walk and the local lord's domain. News here is not about the Americas, but about the harvest, the birth of a child, or a quarrel over a fence line. The primary power source you witness is not coal, but the muscle of oxen turning a millstone or plowing a field. Water wheels are the pinnacle of technology, harnessing a fraction of a river's energy for grinding grain or forging simple tools. The landscape is not scarred by quarries or mines. The Earth's crust remains largely undisturbed beyond surface clay and stone. The night is absolute, a profound darkness broken only by moonlight, stars, and the faint glow of hearth fires. Your day is governed by the sun, not the clock. You rise at dawn and retire soon after dusk, your rhythm solar, not mechanical. The concept of standard time is meaningless. Each town operates on its own slightly different solar noon. This is not a life of poverty, but one of a different scale, where energy is precious, finite, and directly felt. You feel the fatigue of the horses, the slow grind of the mill, the sheer effort required to shape metal or move earth. Progress is a gentle slope, not a steep curve, and the world feels stable, predictable, and intensely physical. You arrive in a major city, a place that would be on the cusp of industrialization in your world, but here it remains a masterpiece of craft. The skyline is a jagged silhouette of church spires and timber-framed buildings, not smokestacks or steel girders. The loudest sounds are the calls of street vendors, the clang of a blacksmith's hammer, and the chatter of a dense population. You enter a workshop where a master clockmaker and his apprentices assemble a complex timepiece over the course of a year. Each gear is filed by hand, each spring tempered with painstaking care. This is the peak of mechanical achievement. There are no factories producing identical goods. Every item, from a shoe to a carriage, bears the mark of its maker. Guilds hold immense power, controlling knowledge, quality, and prices, fiercely protecting their secrets from outsiders. Innovation is slow and incremental, a refinement of centuries-old techniques rather than disruptive revolution. The wealth of the city is displayed in intricate wood carvings, detailed metalwork, and finely woven textiles, not in mass-produced commodities. You realize that without steam, the very concept of replaceable parts and assembly lines never takes hold. Repair is a revered skill, and objects are built to last for generations, to be mended and cherished, not discarded. This creates a world of immense beauty and individuality, but also one of high cost and limited availability. A simple iron pot is a significant household investment, and glass windows are a sign of substantial wealth. And the pace of change is almost geological, and social mobility is equally constrained by the rigid guild structure. You are surrounded by human skill, but it is a skill that cannot be easily scaled, only patiently replicated over a lifetime. You journey deeper into the countryside, away from the centers of human craft, and the landscape tells a different story. The earth is unblemished by the deep scars of open-pit mines or the skeletal towers of oil derricks. Vast forests, which in your time were cleared for fuel or farmland, still stand as ancient, breathing entities. Rivers run clear, not clouded by industrial runoff, and the air carries the pure scent of pine and damp soil. Coal remains a curious black rock, occasionally used for smithing, not the lifeblood of an entire civilization. Oil is a seepage used for waterproofing and lamp fuel, not a strategic resource fought over by global empires. The planet's carbon remains safely locked underground, and the great acceleration of climate change never begins. This is a world where humanity's footprint is lighter, a gentle pressure rather than a crushing weight. But this ecological balance comes at a cost of its own. A ceiling on human population and material wealths. Without fossil fuels to supercharge agriculture, the planet can support perhaps 1 billion, maybe 2 souls. Famines are a real and recurring tragedy, tied directly to harvest failures and the slow speed of relief. The wilderness is vast, mysterious, and often threatening, pressing in on the edges of settled lands. You feel a profound sense of nature's scale and power, a force that humanity respects but does not yet dominate. The idea of conquering a continent is laughable. The best one can do is carve out a precarious foothold. This world is greener, quieter, and in many ways more pristine, but it is also a world of harder limits. This slower, muscle-powered world inevitably shapes the nature of conflict and the ambitions of empires. You find yourself observing a military campaign, but it bears little resemblance to the total wars of the 20th century. An army marches on its stomach, as the saying goes, and here that stomach is filled by grain wagons pulled by oxen. The speed of advance is the speed of a walking man, and supply lines are fragile threads easily severed by bad weather or raiders. Napoleon Bonaparte still rises, a brilliant tactician, but his Grande Armée is a fraction of its historical size. He cannot concentrate and supply the vast hosts that marched on Moscow. His logistics are tethered to horse-drawn carts. His empire remains a European project, a patchwork of alliances and client states, unable to project power globally. The Battle of Waterloo might still be fought, but it is a clash of armies measured in tens of thousands, not hundreds of thousands. Warfare is a seasonal affair, largely halting in the winter when foraging becomes impossible and movement grinds to a halt. Conquest is not about obliterating the enemy's industrial capacity, but about capturing key fortresses and fertile valleys. The rifle is a precision instrument, not a weapon of massed, rapid fire, and battles retain a certain brutal intimacy. The world has not yet witnessed the industrialized slaughter that redefines humanity's tolerance for death. Military power is a function of population, agricultural surplus, and leadership, not of steel production or railway networks. This creates a more multipolar world, where a well-organized smaller state can still defy a larger lumbering neighbor. You see that without the engine of industry, the engine of war also sputters. limiting the scale of human conflict. Crossing the Atlantic, you arrive in a North America that is developed along entirely different lines. The United States exists, but it is a loose, fragile confederation of states clinging to the eastern seaboard. Without the steam locomotive to conquer the continental distances, the idea of manifest destiny is a poetic dream. The Appalachians form a formidable western barrier, and the vast interior is a patchwork of indigenous nations, trading posts, and European enclaves. The Louisiana Purchase never happens. Napoleon has no reason to sell a territory he cannot hold or exploit. The primary arteries of commerce are not railroads, but rivers and a nascent network of canals like the Erie Canal. These canals are marvels of manual labor, dug by thousands of workers with shovels and picks, not steam shovels. Cities like New Orleans and St. Louis thrive as river ports, but Chicago remains a small settlement on the Great Lakes. The continent is a puzzle of competing influences: British, French, Spanish, Mexican, and powerful native confederacies. The Civil War, if it occurs, would be a limited regional conflict, lacking the industrial might for total war. Without the unifying pressure of rapid transport and communication, regional identities remain strong and separatist sentiments simmer. You witness a slower, more negotiated process of expansion, based on trade and diplomacy as much as on force. The cowboy is not a romantic figure herding cattle to railheads, but a practical rancher supplying local markets. The Wild West remains wild for much longer, its myths untamed by the telegraph and the railroad. This America is not a global superpower in waiting, but a complex, fragmented continent finding its own slow pace. The absence of the steam engine shifts the focus of scientific inquiry away from thermodynamics and brute force. You find yourself in a salon where intellectuals debate not power generation, but the nature of electricity and magnetism. The steam engine's dominance in our timeline arguably delayed a deeper understanding of electromagnetism for decades. Here, without that distraction, thinkers like Faraday and Maxwell might have unlocked the secrets of the electron earlier. The battery becomes a primary object of study, a compact source of potential energy far more elegant than a firebox. You see intricate experiments with wires, magnets, and chemical solutions probing the fundamental forces of the universe. The telegraph, a technology that only requires a circuit, emerges as the first great practical application of this science. Wires strung on wooden poles begin to stitch continents together, carrying messages at the speed of light. This creates a world with an odd disconnect: near instantaneous communication over vast distances, but slow, physical travel. A merchant in London can know about a crop failure in India in hours, but the relief grain still takes months to arrive. The sciences of precision, optics, clockmaking, chemistry advance rapidly, fueled by the demands of instrumentation. You witness the creation of exquisite telescopes and microscopes, revealing worlds both vast and infinitesimal. The internal combustion engine remains a laboratory curiosity, as there is no industrial base to manufacture it precisely or cheaply. Flight is dreamed of not in terms of powerful engines, but of lighter-than aircraft or intricate, human-powered gliders. The scientific revolution is one of finesse and connection, not of overwhelming power and consumption. The quest to overcome distance without steam turns humanity's gaze upwards, to the domain of the birds. You find yourself in a field where audacious inventors test fragile, gas-filled envelopes and intricate winged contraptions. The hot air balloon, a simple yet profound technology, becomes the first successful vehicle for human flight. You witness the awe and terror of a maiden voyage, the basket lifting silently, offering a God's eye view of the world. These balloons are not for mass transit. They are tools for exploration, reconnaissance, and scientific observation. Military strategists quickly see their value, using them as observation posts to peer behind enemy lines. But ballooning is a fickle art, a prisoner of the winds, unable to steer a deliberate course from point A to point B. This limitation spurs a feverish pursuit of dirigibles, airships with rigid frames and propellers driven by muscle or clockwork. You see sketches of vast, whale-like structures cruising the skies, their progress slow but steerable. Meanwhile, the dream of heavier-than-air flight captivates a different kind of mind, the obsessive tinkerer. Their workshops are filled with models of wings made from wood, wire, and fabric, tested in wind tunnels of their own design. These pioneers are not trying to build an engine powerful enough to lift a plane. They are trying to perfect a wing elegant enough to glide. Flight in this world is seen first as a feat of balance and aerodynamics, not of raw power. The sky becomes a new frontier, but a silent and serene one, filled with gliders and airships, not the roar of jets. It is a beautiful, slower conquest of the air, one that requires harmony with the wind rather than domination over it. Global power dynamics shift fundamentally in a world without industrial muscle, favoring control over resources, not production. You find yourself in the tropics, where empires are not built in factories but in plantations and trading ports. The great powers are those who control the sources of sugar, tea, coffee, spices, and, crucially, rubber and nitrates. These are the botanical empires, their wealth springing from the soil under a tropical sun, cultivated by manual labor. The race is not to produce the most steel, but to secure the most fertile land and the trade routes that connect it to home. Navies are still vital, but they are fleets of wooden sailing ships protecting merchant convoys, not ironclads projecting power. Without synthetic alternatives, natural rubber becomes a strategic commodity of immense importance, shaping colonial policy. Wars are fought over guano-rich islands for fertilizer and over narrow straits that control access to lucrative markets. The map is colored not by industrial output, but by spheres of influence over agricultural and mineral-rich regions. This world has its own brutal form of colonialism, one based on extraction and plantation economies, often intensifying slavery. The incentive to replace human muscle with machines is lower when that muscle can be brutally and cheaply exploited. You see a global system that is exploitative and unequal, but on a smaller, more mercantile scale than the industrial colonialism we know. The 19th century passes without a single, dominant hyperpower. Instead, several great powers compete in a delicate balance. This balance prevents a single, catastrophic world war, but leads to countless smaller regional conflicts over resources. The world order is a tense, complex web of alliances and rivalries, all rooted in the control of nature's bounty. As the 19th century wanes, you find yourself in a city like London, a metropolis that has grown dense and vertical without skyscrapers. The skyline is a forest of brick and stone, buildings packed tightly together, rising 6 or 7 stories high. The streets below are a perpetual twilight, narrow canyons where sunlight rarely touches the cobblestones. At night, the city is illuminated by the warm, flickering glow of gaslight, casting long, dancing shadows. The air carries a mix of coal smoke from domestic hearths, horse manure, and the smell of thousands of people living in close quarters. There is no electric hum, only the cacophony of hoofbeats, wagon wheels, street vendors, and the constant murmur of the crowd. Movement within the city is a chore. The wealthy travel by private carriage, stuck in traffic jams of their own making. The poor trudge everywhere on foot, their lives circumscribed by the distance they can reasonably walk in a day. The Underground Railway, if it exists, is a shallow cut-and-cover line powered by silent electric batteries or smoky coal-fired engines. This is a city of sharp contrasts, where extreme wealth and brutal poverty exist literally on top of each other. Sanitation is a constant battle, with night soil collectors removing waste by hand and cart, a vulnerable link in public health. Disease outbreaks are more common and more devastating without the infrastructure and medical advances of an industrial age. The city is a magnificent, sprawling organism, but it is also a precarious one, living close to the edge of its logistical limits. It represents the peak of pre-industrial urban civilization, a testament to human organization without fossil fuel-powered infrastructure. You feel the energy of the place, but also its fragility, a system maintained by sheer effort and constant, grinding labor. The reliance on human and animal muscle, in the absence of a mechanical alternative, has a dark and inevitable consequence. You see this starkly in the Americas, where the plantation economy expands rather than contracts. Without the economic pressure to mechanize, the institution of slavery becomes even more deeply entrenched. The calculus is brutal and simple. Why invest in a complex, expensive machine when human beings can be bought and worked to death? The abolitionist movement faces a far steeper climb, battling an economic system that is not being rendered obsolete by progress. In other parts of the world, serfdom and other forms of bonded labor persist well into what we would call the modern era. The value of a human life is measured in terms of its output, its ability to perform physical tasks. This is a world where the horrors of the antebellum South or the rubber plantations of the Congo are not historical anomalies. They are the logical, grim foundation of a global economy still built on brute force extraction. Social progress is slowed, as the ruling classes have less incentive to improve conditions for a disposable workforce. You witness a society where the line between person and property remains blurry for a much longer time. The great moral victories of the 19th and 20th centuries are delayed, if they arrive at all. The fight for human dignity is a longer, harder struggle against a system with a vested interest in maintaining its cheap labor. This shadow hangs over the technological and cultural achievements, a reminder of the cost of this slower path. The world is, in many ways, more brutal for the many and more comfortable for the few who benefit from this stagnation. The scientific focus on chemistry and biomaterials, rather than petrochemicals, leads to a different kind of innovation. You walk through a world where plastics, as you know them, do not exist. There are no synthetic polymers. Instead, materials science advances through the manipulation of natural substances, vulcanized rubber, celluloid from plant fibers, and casein from milk. These bioplastics are often biodegradable and less durable, creating a culture of repair and reuse out of necessity. Your belongings are made of wood, glass, metal, ceramic, and treated natural fibers like linen and leather. The chemical industry is focused on dyes, medicines, and fertilizers derived from plants and minerals, not from oil. You see pharmacies filled with tinctures and extracts from a vast global pharmacopoeia of herbs and barks. The race is to catalog and synthesize the active compounds in nature, not to create wholly new synthetic molecules. This world is less polluted by persistent synthetic chemicals, but also more vulnerable to the limitations of natural supply. A disease that affects a specific plant in a specific region can cause a global shortage of a vital medicine or dye. The search for alternatives to whale oil for lighting leads to more efficient cultivation of rapeseed and other oil-bearing plants. Without the convenience of fossil fuels, the development of solar and water power is pursued with greater urgency, but with 18th century tools. You see ambitious, if primitive, attempts to concentrate solar heat and harness ocean tides on an industrial scale. It is a world of elegant biological solutions, but also of fragility and dependency on the whims of nature. Progress is a partnership with the natural world, for better and for worse, not an attempt to dominate it. The slower pace of life and the limitations of technology foster a different intellectual and artistic climate. You find a culture less obsessed with the new and the now, and more focused on depth, tradition, and craftsmanship. The novel remains a dominant art form, but stories unfold at a more leisurely pace, reflecting the rhythm of the world. Philosophy grapples with the human condition within natural limits, exploring concepts of harmony and sustainability. The frantic avant-garde movements of the 20th century are absent. Art evolves through gradual refinement of established styles. Music is composed for smaller ensembles and acoustic spaces, prized for its intricacy and emotional nuance. There is no mass media. News and culture spread through newspapers, books, public lectures, and word of mouth. This creates a more fragmented cultural landscape where regional differences in art, dialect, and custom remain strong. A scientific theory or a new book can take years to gain widespread acceptance, debated thoroughly in salons and universities. The concept of a global celebrity is impossible. Fame is regional, based on tangible achievements in a specific field. Without the disorienting shock of rapid industrialization, there is less of the existential angst that characterized modernism. People's identities are more firmly rooted in their local community, trade, and family history. This world possesses a deep, ingrained sense of place, but also a potential for parochialism and resistance to outside ideas. It is a culture of patience, where creating a masterpiece is expected to take a lifetime, not a season. The human spirit adapts, finding richness and meaning not in speed and quantity, but in slowness and quality. As the calendar pages turn towards the 20th century, the world you inhabit is recognizably modern, yet fundamentally different. Global powers are not superpowers. They are great powers, locked in a tense but stable balance of influence. The British, French, German, and maybe a resource-rich United States or Russia are the major players on the world stage. Their rivalry is expressed not in arms races of dreadnoughts and bombers, but in colonial expansion and economic spheres. A catastrophic, industrial-scale world war is structurally impossible. No nation possesses the means to wage it. The battles that are fought are limited colonial wars or border skirmishes, bloody for those involved, but contained. The map of the world is a complex patchwork of colonies, protectorates, and independent states with no clear hegemon. International diplomacy is a delicate, continuous dance, a game of chess played across the globe with real armies and navies. The League of Nations, or something like it, might emerge not from the ashes of a great war, but as a tool to manage this multipolar peace. This is a world that has avoided the singular defining traumas of the world wars and the atomic bomb. But it is also a world that has not been forced to confront its own demons on such a massive transformative scale. The profound social changes accelerated by total war, women in the workforce, technological leaps unfold at a glacial pace. The 20th century dawns not as an age of extreme ideologies and existential threats, but as an age of managed imperial competition. It is a quieter, perhaps more stable century, but one still built on foundations of inequality and colonial exploitation. The future seems predictable, a continuation of the established order, for better and for worse. The most profound divergence in this steamless world becomes apparent as you peer into its technological future. The fundamental building block of the information age, the computer, faces an almost insurmountable challenge. In our timeline, the massive industrial base and precision engineering forged by steam and oil made transistors possible. Here, the idea of manufacturing millions of identical, microscopic switches on a sliver of silicon is a fantasy. Computation remains a mechanical or electromechanical endeavor, reliant on gears, relays, and vacuum tubes. You might see sophisticated analog computers, beautiful brass and wire machines that can calculate tides or artillery trajectories. But these are large room-sized devices, painstakingly crafted by hand for specific, limited purposes. They cannot be miniaturized or mass-produced. There is no path from the difference engine to the laptop. The digital revolution, with its exponential growth in processing power, simply never occurs. Without the computer, there is no internet, no digital globalization, no smartphone in your pocket. Research in fields like genetics and astrophysics is hamstrung by the lack of computational power for modeling and data analysis. Medicine advances through careful observation and chemistry, not through genomic sequencing or complex imaging. The flow of information reverts to its pre-digital forms: books, letters, telegrams, and a limited telephone network. Society remains more analog, more local, and in many ways more knowable, but also less connected and efficient. The ceiling on technological progress is dramatically lower, defined by the limits of mechanics and human craft. And so you find yourself in the present day of this alternate timeline, a world shaped by the gentle power of water and muscle. Your society is a sophisticated hydraulic civilization, where networks of canals and aqueducts are its lifeblood. Highly efficient water wheels and tidal generators provide the modest power needed for lighting and small-scale industry. The air is clean, the nights are dark and star-filled, and the rhythm of life is attuned to the seasons and the flow of rivers. Your personal transportation is a well-crafted bicycle or an efficient electric tram, powered by batteries charged by water. There are no sprawling suburbs. Cities are dense and walkable, with green spaces woven into their fabric. Global travel is a luxury, undertaken by sleek, advanced sailing ships or quiet, hydrogen-filled airships on fixed routes. The internet is a dream of science fiction. Your connection to the world is through a robust library system and a telegraph-based news network. You work as a craftsperson, an engineer, a farmer, or a teacher. Professions centered on skill, care, and direct human impact. Life is less about consumption and more about maintenance, about keeping the intricate human-scale systems running smoothly. There is a deep-seated respect for resources, because you are acutely aware of their limits and the effort required to obtain them. This world has avoided the existential threats of climate change and nuclear war, but it faces its own challenges. Population growth is carefully managed, and pandemics can still sweep through regions with devastating effect. The pace of medical and technological advancement is slow, and some diseases remain incurable. It is a world of trade-offs: greater stability and sustainability, but less dynamism and a lower ceiling on human achievement. This is your life in the hydraulic age, a reality built on a path not taken, a world of graceful, deliberate motion. You wake to the sound of water flowing in the canal outside your window, not the roar of traffic or the buzz of electronics. Your day is structured, predictable, and deeply connected to the physical community around you. You know the baker, the mechanic, the librarian. Your social network is tangible, not digital. The frenetic pace of the 21st century is replaced by a rhythm that feels almost ancient, yet sustainable. You have a profound sense of belonging to a place, to an ecosystem, to a lineage of craftspeople and caretakers. The anxieties of our world, information overload, algorithmic manipulation, environmental doom, are foreign concepts here. Your challenges are concrete: mending a broken wheel, preserving the harvest, navigating a personal dispute. There is a quiet satisfaction in mastery, in doing one thing well over a lifetime, in seeing your direct contribution to the whole. Yet sometimes you look at the stars and feel a pang for what might have been, for the lost potential of a faster, grander scale. You wonder about the symphonies never composed, the diseases never cured, the distant planets never glimpsed. This world chose a different kind of greatness, not height and speed, but depth and endurance. It is a civilization that may never reach for the stars, but has learned through necessity to cherish its garden. The steam engine was a key, unlocking a door to a room of immense power and peril. This world never found that key, and in doing so, built its home carefully, room by room, in the antechamber.